Hey everyone, welcome back to the Programming Fields. I'm Umesh Rana, and in the today's video, we are diving into something really exciting: how to integrate the social login. Specifically, in today's video, we will implement the Google login in your Laravel application using Laravel Socialite package. The Socialite package makes it super easy to authenticate users through popular services like Google, Facebook, X, LinkedIn, GitHub, and more. By the end of this video, you will have a fully functioning Google login for your application. And for this, we are using Laravel 11 here, but this should work with earlier versions too. So let's get started. But before we dive in, make sure you have subscribed to the Programming Fields and hit the bell icon so you never miss any update from Programming Fields. Alright, let's get started by installing a fresh Laravel 11 project. However, it is not needed if you already have a Laravel 11 project set up. So quickly I will come to the terminal and here I will install Laravel 11 application. So I will type Laravel new Socialite app. And for this application, I will choose a starter kit as Laravel Bridge. So I will select and I will hit enter. And for the bridge stack, I will choose Blade with Alpine. I won't choose dark mode support. So I will select no and I will continue. Regarding the testing framework, I will choose paste and I don't want to initialize any Git repository as of now. So I will go with no. And here the Laravel 11 application installation has been started. So let's wait for a couple of seconds to finish the installation. Now regarding the database, it is asking which database you want to choose. I will select SQLite by default. And as of now, I don't want to run the default migration, so I will select no. Yes. Now it started installing Bridge Authentication and thereafter it installed Laravel Paste for the testing framework. And for the front-end dependencies, this will install node modules. Yes, so the project setup has been done. Now let's cd into the project folder and let's open this in the VS Code editor. Yes, the project has been opened in the VS Code editor. Okay. Now let's quickly start the application. So I will open the terminal here and I will type PHP artisan serve. The project has been started on 8000 port. Now in the next step, we will have to install the Laravel Socialite package. So let's come to the official documentation of Laravel. And here under the Socialite section, if we'll scroll down, here we have the installation command. So let's copy this. Let's come to the terminal. Let's paste that command and let's hit enter. Here this is installing Laravel Socialite package. Yes, the package has been installed. Let's come to the project folder and let's verify this. So let's search for the composer.json file. Here we have the Laravel Socialite package. This is done. Now in the next step, we will access our application. So let's come to the browser and if we'll try to access localhost 8000, this will throw error because we have not executed the default migration set. Laravel Bridge package needs the database tables as sessions in order to manage the authentication session. So we will have to execute the default migrations at this time. So I will type PHP artisan migrate. This said the database is not created. Would you like to create? I will say yes and I will hit enter. It created the database.sqlite file and here it executed the default migrations. Let's come to the browser now. Let me refresh. Yes, it loaded the Laravel homepage. Here we have the login and register option. So Laravel Bridge provided default register and login view. Alright. But in today's video, we are not going to use the authentication using Laravel Bridge package. Instead, we will use the Socialite login with Google. So here I will have to add one more login link that will redirect to the Google login. So inside this login page, I will add one more hyperlink here. So let's come to the code editor. Under the resources, views folder, we have the auth folder here. Inside this auth, we have the login.blade. If we'll scroll down, here inside this div, we have the forgot password and login button. So here I will add one more hyperlink just before this forgot password and I will give title as login with Google. and inside this class I will add Tailwind CSS classes here. I will add inline block, padding x of 6, padding y of 2, text white, and here I will add background color as a red. So I will add BG red 600, and also I will add rounded border. So I will add rounded LG, and we can add shadow class. Alright, this is fine. Let's come to the browser. Let me refresh. Yeah, we have the button as login with Google, and here this design is overlapping due to this small card. So here I will increase this card width of this login page. So let's come to the code editor, and inside this views folder we have the layouts folder. If we'll expand this, we have the guest layout here. So all the views which are not related to authentication, these are rendered over this guest blade slot. So here we have the class added as smmax width md. I will change this to LG. So this will increase the width of that card, and if we refresh, yes, this increased the card width here. Now regarding these buttons, we need some spaces among these buttons. So if we'll come inside this login blade again, here these all buttons are added inside this flags, and this has class added as justify end. So instead of justify end, I will add justify between. This is fine. Let's refresh now. Yeah, we have spaces among these buttons. Now we will have to implement the login with Google functionality, so that when we will click on this login with Google button, this will open the Google authentication, and after the successful authentication from the Google, a callback will happen, and that will again redirect back to this application. So in order to execute this, firstly we will have to generate the API credentials from the Google Developer Console. So let's open the Google Developer Console. Let's click on this Google Cloud Console. Here you will have to log in to your registered Google account, and after the successful login, you will be redirected on this welcome new page. Now in the next step, you will have to create or select a project. So inside this drop down, you have an option to select a project, but if you don't have any project created, you will have to create a new project from here. So let's click on new project. You will have to provide the project name here. I will give the project name as programming fields auth app. Now regarding the location, this is chosen under no organization. Let's click on create. So this is creating the project. Alright. Again, if we will click on this drop down, here you can see the project has been created. If we'll click on this, now we have selected this project. Now here you will have to click on this hamburger menu. Under this API and services, we have the credentials option. Let's click on this. Here we don't have any credentials created by default, so you will have to create a new credentials from this create credentials option. Let's click on this. Here we will have to create OAuth client ID. So let's click on this OAuth client ID. Now you will have to configure the consent screen. Let's confirm this. Here you will have to choose the user type, internal or external. If you want to set it only for your organization, you can set it internal. As of now, I will choose external. I will click on create. Now you have the OAuth consent screen. Let's provide the app name as I will set programming fields. You will have to provide any email address. I will choose the email address. Logo is optional. Also, you will have to provide the developer contact information. I will enter the same email address here. Save and continue. Now in the next step, we have the scopes. So I will keep this default and I will click on save and continue. Now regarding the users, I don't want to add any users from here. So I will keep this default and I will click on save and continue. We have the final preview of this OAuth consent screen. Let's click on back to dashboard. Okay, this is completed. Now let's click on credentials again. Let's click on create credentials and here let's choose OAuth client ID again. Now we have the drop down option. We will have to choose application type. Here we are going to create web application to manage the social login. So I will choose web application. You can change this name. I will keep the same as web client 1. Okay. Now we have the add URI option. Here in the URI option, you will have to provide the application URL for which you want to make browser request. So in our case, our application URL is running on the localhost 8000. So I will provide this localhost 8000 URL here. So I will add URI as http://localhost:8000. So this is our base URL of this localhost application. In case your application is deployed on your web server, then you can provide that domain name here. Now in the next step, we have to add the authorized redirect URIs. So this will be basically our callback URLs on which the Google will redirect after the successful authentication. So we will have to create a route in our application and we will have to provide that route URL here. So I will add URI as http localhost 8000 and here I will provide one route URL, let's suppose auth, and I will add Google callback. You can provide any route here based on your application, but you will have to make sure you will have to add the same route in your application as well, so that after the successful authentication, Google will understand that where it should redirect. Let's click on create. Yes, it generated the client ID and client secret. You can download this JSON from here. Now in the next step, we will have to add these credentials in our application configuration. So what I will do, I will simply copy this client ID. I will come to the application. Now I will come to the .env file and if I will scroll down, and here I will add a few variables for the configuration. So I will add Google client ID and I will paste that. Okay. Next we will have to create Google client secret. I will come to the developer console again. I will copy this client secret and I will paste it here. Okay. Now we will have to create one more variable and that will be for our callback URL. So I will add Google callback redirects and here I will provide http localhost 8000 auth/Google callback. And if you remember, while creating the OAuth client ID, I had added the same callback URL in the Google developer console. Okay. So this is all you need to configure the Google authentication thing. So we have added these all credentials in the .env file. Now we will have to use these credentials while making the OAuth request to the Google. So before making that, we'll have to come under the config folder. Here we have this services.php configuration. Inside this, if we'll scroll down, here we have the list of arrays. So inside this array, I will create one configuration for the Google. Okay. Here we will have to add client ID and we will fetch that client ID from the env file and we have the Google client ID there. Next we will have to add client secret and that I will fetch it from env Google client secret. Lastly we will have to add the redirect key and again I will fetch this from env itself. So we have the Google callback redirects variable. You will have to make sure you are keeping the same keys here in this array. So you will have to keep client ID, client secret and redirect. If you will come to the official documentation of Laravel again and if you will scroll down, here you will have to add the array in the same format, client ID, client secret and redirect. Okay. Now it totally depends on you. Either you can create the credentials in the env file or you can add those credentials directly in the configuration of this services file. But this will be more convenient if you add the credentials in the .env itself, so that you can change this anytime when this is needed and every time you don't have to come inside this configuration of this service file. And please don't try to use these credentials because anyhow after this application setup, I will remove that application from this Google. Okay. So you won't be able to use the credentials again. Now let's come to the next step. We have configured the credentials here. Now in the next step, we will have to add the redirect functionality in this login with Google hyperlink. So here I will add one route as, let's suppose, auth.google, and we will have to define this route in the web.php file. So I will come to the web.php file, and here I will create one route as route : get. I will add auth/google. Okay, and we need a controller in which we can define some functions in order to manage the Google login. I will create a new controller. So I will type php artisan make controller. I will give the controller name as Socialite controller. Let's hit enter. Yes, the controller has been created. Now I will import that controller. So I will add Socialite controller : class, and I will add the function name as Google login. Okay, and I will add the named route as auth.google, because we have already configured this route name inside this login with Google URL. This is fine. Now we will have to come inside the Socialite auth controller, and we will have to create a function, public function Google login. Okay, now inside this function we will have to add a redirection to the Google based on the Socialite driver. So we will have to return Socialite, and we will have to import this package from Laravel Socialite facades Socialite. Inside this return Socialite, we will use the driver function, and inside this driver we will have to provide the driver name. So currently we are implementing the Google login, so we will have to provide the Google here, and we will call the redirect function. Okay, this is fine. So this function is for redirecting to Google only. This function will redirect to Google, and this does not need any parameter. Okay, this is fine. Now if we'll come to the browser, if we'll refresh, and if we'll try to click on login with Google, you can see this redirected to the accounts.google.com, and this is trying to make the OAuth request to the Google. And here you will have to choose the Google account through that you want to authenticate. And after the successful authentication, this will again redirect back to your application. So you will have to handle that request as well. So firstly we will handle that request. So let's come to the application, and we will have to define that route here that we already configured in the Google Developer Console. So I will create one more route as route : get, and here I will add the endpoint name as auth Google callback, and again we will have to add the function in the same controller. So what I will do, I will create the controller group routes. Okay, I will add group function, and I will add these two routes inside this. So I will move these routes inside this. I will remove this. Now regarding the second route, we will have to define one more function as Google Authentication, and here I will provide the route name as auth.google callback. Now let's copy this function name. Let's come inside this Socialite controller. Let's define this function as public function Google Authentication. Okay, I will add the annotation. This function will authenticate the user through the Google account. This does not need any parameter. Okay, now inside this function we will have to get the authenticated user data. So for that we will have to call the Socialite driver function again. Here we will have to provide the driver name as Google, and then we will have to call the user function, and I will capture this in a variable as Google user. This is fine, and I will add dump and die $Google user. Here we will check if we are getting the authenticated user data from the Google. So let's come to the application. Let's go back. Let's refresh. Let's try to click on login with Google. Now let's choose your Google account. I will select my Google account here, and after selecting, here it asks to sign in with the Google confirmation. I will continue. So after the successful authentication, here it returned the user's data from the Google. Firstly, we have the Google ID. Here the Google generated the unique ID for this user authentication. Here we have the name, email and the user details. Okay. So after the successful login, we have to capture this Google ID and we will have to store this in our users table. So that on every Google authentication, this will check if this Google ID exists in our users table, then it won't insert that user in the users table. Instead, this will directly log in that user. So first time, this will insert that user if that user does not exist in the users table. Okay. So in order to store this Google ID, we will have to create a new column in our users table. So let's come to the code editor. Inside the users table migration, I will add one more column as $table string Google underscore ID, and by default I will set this to nullable. Okay. And now I will rerun the migration. So I will come to the terminal. I will type php artisan migrate refresh. Okay. This added the migration, and if we'll check in the database.sqlite, inside the users table, we have the Google ID added. Now let's come to the controller again, and here we will have to capture that Google ID. So here what I will do, I will check from the user table. So I will import user model where Google ID is Google user ID. Alright, that means from the users table Google ID, I will check if we have same Google ID that is coming from Google authentication, then I will make that user to authenticated login, else we will have to create that user. So I will use first function here, and I will store this in a variable as $user. Okay. I will add if condition. If the user exists in the user table, then I will use auth function. We will have to use the auth function, and I will use the login function. And here I will have to import this auth facade. So I will use illuminate support facades auth. Okay. And inside this auth login function, I will pass this user. Alright. So if the user data exists in the user table, then this will make that user to authenticated login, and after the successful login, we will have to redirect to the dashboard page. So we already have the dashboard route provided by Laravel bridge. So I will use return redirect route dashboard. Alright. Now if that user does not exist in the user table, then we will have to add the else condition, and inside the else condition we will have to insert that user data. Okay. So we will have to create the user data array here. So I will call user model create function again. Inside this array, I will add name as we are getting the name from the Google user. If we'll check the data here, we have the name field, we have the email. Alright. So according to this, we can store name and email inside the users table. If you need to store avatar, you can store that. Let's continue this. So I will create name, and this will come from the Google user name field. Next we have email field, and that we will store from Google user email address. Also we will have to create a dummy password for that user. So I will use hash facade, and I will call the make function. We have the hash facade imported here. I will pass password as a dummy password. Okay. And also we will have to store the Google ID that we have created a new column here, and this will be captured from the Google user primary ID, and if we'll check here we have the Google ID. Okay, this is fine. And after creating this user record, again we will have to make this user to login. So I will capture this in a variable as user data. I will check if we have the user data again. Again I will call auth login function here, and inside this I will pass this user data, and also we will have to redirect this user to the same dashboard route. Alright, this is done. Now let's remove this dump and die here, and I will keep this entire function in a try catch block, and I will use this exception. Okay, let me cut these lines from here, and I will keep these inside this try block, and here I will add dump and die $e. Okay, this is fine. And before executing this, we will have to add the Google ID column in the fillable property inside the user model. So if we will come inside the app models user.php, here you will have to add that fillable property as Google ID. Now let's save, come to the browser, let's go back, let's refresh this page, and let's try to click on login with Google now. This is authenticating, yes, and after this successful authentication, here we can see this user has redirected to the dashboard page, and here in the profile option we are getting the profile name and email address, and these details are coming after the authentication from the Google, because we have not created any user manually. After the successful authentication, this has registered the user in the users table, and if we check the database.sqlite, here we have the registered user name, email, and we have the Google ID stored here. Okay, let's come to the browser, let's log out, let's try to click on login again, and again I will click on login with Google. Yes, this automatically logged in that user, and if we'll check the users table, it has not created second entry of that user because that user and that Google ID already exist in the user table. Okay, now if we'll try to log in through the password, because we already registered that user, and if we'll click on login, I will provide that email address here. Also I will have to provide that password, and we added the password as password@1234. Let me copy and paste it here, and if we'll click on login, yes, we have logged in through the password as well. Now if we'll log out the application, and here if you sign out from Chrome, okay, and if we'll refresh the application, and if we'll try to click on login again, let's choose the login with Google. Here it asked for the account that you want to use for the authentication purpose, and if we'll select that account, you will have to enter the password for that, and after entering the password, if I will click on next, this is authenticating, and again you will have to confirm the sign in. Yes, again I have logged into that application. Okay, and that's all. We have successfully set up social login with Google in our Laravel application using Socialite. It's that easy. If you found this video helpful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with your developer friends. Also, if you have any questions or suggestion for the future videos, don't forget to drop a comment below, and also don't forget to subscribe to the Programming Fields channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more tutorials. In the next video, we will explore how to integrate Facebook login using Socialite. So stay tuned for that.